Back in 2010, Playdead's Limbo was released. It was very well received and remains a very interesting game to me. 6 years later, their next game would be Inside. It holds a similar premise and mechanics, but builds on everything Limbo had and improves on it with more impressive 3D visuals and deeper mechanics. 1 year later, we get a very curious game called Little Nightmares. This title seems to invoke a lot of the same themes as Playdead's work, but in its own unique way. I've seen games that have tried to be like Limbo before, so how does this entry hold up? Little Nightmares has a very simple opening. You awake aboard some sort of sea vessel with no memory of how you got there. You are in the shoes of, you play as Six, a young girl who has found herself aboard a ship called the Maw. I only know of these names because of the website. Yeah, it's one of those type of games. Six has to navigate through a strange, oversized world and avoid the many obstacles and solve puzzles to proceed. It's definitely the Limbo formula, but how well does it pull it off? The controls and movement in Little Nightmares immediately feels pretty nice. You're given the usual jump, climb, and grab options. Something new this time around is how you can throw objects, sneak, and sprint, which definitely would have been nice in games like Inside. You also have access to a lighter for exploring darker areas. A lot of the platforming felt very satisfying due to how Six moves. The visual feedback for her jumps, falls, and grabs looks very detailed, and made traversing the environment engaging. The 3D movement with the 2D progression is a bit strange, but is very visually nice. You usually have a pretty good idea of where you need to go, and moving around isn't awkward. But what can be a bit tricky are a few of the vertical jumps. There were also times I would rush into a new room and immediately run off an edge because I didn't know the area would have a pit. There's also no shimmy, and that can be annoying sometimes. This doesn't happen often though, so it isn't much of an issue. The puzzle design is something I really enjoyed in both Limbo and especially Inside. Any game attempting to mimic the two should be held to a pretty high standard. The puzzles in Little Nightmares have you utilizing your different skills all while interacting with the 3D environment. As a result, a lot of just simple platforming can feel like a neat puzzle when you're moving about this giant world. The more standard ones are fun and not too vague, but it's not quite Inside levels of good. That game had a lot of puzzles that introduced concepts that would later be reused and then added upon. Little Nightmares does do this a few times, but not quite on the scale of Inside. It's also strange that the lighter you have is never used for any puzzles. I wanted to set stuff on fire, but alas, no arson in this game. But as is, the puzzles kept me engaged and felt suitable for the setting. One of the biggest draws to this game has to be its visuals. Limbo and Inside both have charming art styles, but this one really has a lot going for it. How tiny Six is in comparison to the rest of the world makes for some very interesting imagery. This is helped by how a lot of the rooms are designed. They have plenty of clutter and feel lived in, but also a little eerie. There are plenty of small details that add a nice touch, such as Six covering her lighter as she runs. Another really great thing is how you can move the camera to see other stuff off screen. This helps you explore, but the main camera itself can zoom out in some really great moments. All of this adds to a strange atmosphere that is creepy, but never gets too over the top or really violent. Just lots of unsettling imagery and some dark implications. I'd like to discuss some of my own interpretations on the game's story and themes, but first I'll sum up what I thought. I enjoyed my time with the game. It lasted long enough at 3.5 hours, but I did want to play more. The developers are going to be adding some DLC later, so at $20 you might want to wait until you can pick it up at a cheaper price with all the extra content. I think the base experience is worth the money if you enjoyed Limbo and Inside, even if the puzzles don't quite stack up. But this is a game I can definitely see myself replaying on a dark night, or showing to a friend. Now I'm going to get into spoilers, so if you want to play it or watch your favorite Let's Player give it a go, now's the time. The game opens with a strange vision of a woman. Six wakes up aboard the Maw and begins to explore the ship without a specific objective, but we can assume it's to escape. She eventually moves through the rooms filled with children and a creature known as the janitor who oversees them. Judging by the cages and security systems, these children are being held against their will. Eventually, Six starts to suffer from hunger pains, but is given a piece of bread by a kind child. And again, this lunchroom looks like a prison, and that kid does not look like he wants to be here. Six starts to find the children in cages, and it only gets worse from there. She finds a room that is filled with rolls of fabric. Then we see the janitors wrapping up the bodies of the children and hanging them on hooks to be taken away. We move through the ship and find a group of creatures called gnomes, who seem to be pretty harmless. They'll mimic your movements and scuttle around the ship. They seem to just clean things up, but they're kinda cute. The bodies continue to a storage room that leads into a kitchen? Hey, Six, there's a bunch of free food here. You wanna grab it and... no? Oh, okay. Here a fat chef is slicing up meat. Don't worry, it just seems like it's fish and such things. But then we find a freezer full of large sacks of processed meat, which is made into sausages, and that massive mulcher we found... Yeah, if it weren't already obvious, we got a classic case of people eating kids here, just like an old fairy tale. But neither the cooks nor the janitor eat the food, both just prepare it. So who's this cannibalistic feast for? Six makes it outside of the maw to see it is docked and is being boarded by passengers. Instead of leaving, she continues to scale the wall in this amazingly beautiful shot. We see that all the passengers are portly men and women in formal wear, but some appear to be wearing masks. Inside, we see a mysterious woman, whom we shall refer to as the Lady, overseeing the arrival of the guests. As Six goes further through the guest quarters, we see that the area has a very Eastern theme. Sliding doors and paper lanterns weren't seen anywhere else in the game. It all seemed to be fairly normal and cohesive. The guests greedily gorge themselves on the food set before them, but seem to know where it comes from. When you move past them, they attempt to devour you and will even go as far to chase you on all fours. Or maybe they're just mistaking you for a giant banana. This leads through a climactic race through the halls as the guests pursue you like a tidal wave. The way they eat and this scene really reminds me of Spirited Away. I mean, the game suddenly got a lot more Japanese inspired, so it makes sense. Six escapes, but once again is hit with hunger pains. It has happened multiple times in the game, going as far as having her enter an obvious trap just to get a bite to eat. But due to her friendship with the gnomes, they bring her a sausage to eat. Six respectfully declines. We'll get back to this, but for now, Six follows the Lady to her private quarters. We quickly find that approaching the Lady directly is a bad idea, as she has dark, otherworldly powers, and for some reason she's looking at a cracked mirror. The decor of the Lady's room is filled with mannequins in Japanese clothes, but all the furniture seems Western. Along the way, we find plenty more shattered mirrors and eye motifs. We discover a single unbroken mirror, and we know what we must do. We manage to stop the Lady, but it's not over yet. Six walks up to her with the same hunger that she had before. Now the same dark powers flow through Six. She walks into the main dining hall, and what follows is a most satisfying moment. Six disposes of every patron in her path, and walks up the stairs to leave. The credits roll, and afterwards we see her on an island that looks like it was somehow connected to the maw. So we all saw the events that happened, and it's not too hard to follow, but I'd like to possibly explain why everything is happening and the motives behind Six. The game starts with her in a suitcase, and not in a cage or room like the other children. I believe that she smuggled herself in because she wanted to get into the maw to stop what was going on. Either she has been through the place before, or has heard about it. On the title screen, we can see that she is outside the ship. In the beginning, Six has a nightmare of the Lady. Was this a vision, or does she know her? And there's one more thing I want to show you. While we were frantically running from the guests, there was something interesting in the hallway. And there. It appears to be a very small child next to the Lady. A similar portrait shows up again in the Lady's bedroom. One even seems to be wearing yellow. Is Six the daughter of the Lady? I believe so. That is how she could have had the idea on how to navigate the ship, and the horrors that went on inside it. So why did she bite that poor little gnome? The alternative was to eat the sausage, but that food had been made from the children. That gnome probably had the best intentions, but Six needed her strength for the final stretch of her journey, but refused to partake of the children. She'd rather harm a gnome than eat like one of the patrons. So, what was the ultimate goal for Six? I think she had been plotting to kill the Lady this entire time. She knew her weakness, and believed that she could inherit her abilities. With those powers, she could then annihilate what remained of the maw so that no one would be left to continue the debauchery. After the credits, she has left the ship but is unsure of what to do next. This is just my take on what I think it means. It could just be that Six killed the guest because she couldn't control her powers. There's a chance that she just accidentally found her way through the ship with no real goal but to escape. And I've even seen a guess that the food from the maw makes you hungrier, which is an interesting idea. Another one was that there are tons of different maws for different parts of the world, and this was one set in Japan. The game is set up in a vague way that it definitely wants you to guess and predict what it means. I'm cautiously waiting for the supposed 3-part DLC, and I hear they even plan for a TV show for the series. Not expecting for that to happen, but it'd be interesting. In the end, I had fun with the Little Nightmares, and if you enjoy games like Limbo, this will probably be a good time for you. A bit worried about that DLC, but the idea of journeying back into the maw, that's too tempting an offer to turn down.